The execution drums of the Galactic Council chamber fell silent. Ambassador Keth'ra Voss stood frozen at the crystalline podium, her four-jointed fingers trembling against the cold surface. In her 3 centuries of diplomatic service, she had witnessed countless sentencing ceremonies, the ritualistic hum of justice dispensers, the chemical dissolution of convicted traitors, the quiet efficiency of galactic law. But she had never heard this. The sound that now filled the vast chamber defied every sonic principle her species understood. It rose from somewhere deep in the prisoner dock, a vibration that seemed to crawl beneath her exoskeleton and settle directly into her neural cortex. The melody, if such a chaotic arrangement could be called that, twisted through frequencies that the Velmari had spent millennia learning to suppress. It made her want to move. Silence the human. High Arbiter Threshkin roared, his massive form rising from a judicial throne. His voice cracked with something Keth'ra had never detected in her superior before: fear. But the human refused to stop. Marcus Chen stood in the prisoner's sphere, his wrists bound by gravitic shackles, his simple gray jumpsuit stained with dried blood from the arrest that had brought him here. He was unremarkable by human standards, medium height, dark hair cropped short, a thin scar running through his left eyebrow. Nothing about his physical form suggested danger. Yet he was singing. The words meant nothing to Keth'ra, some primitive earth language she couldn't translate, but the feeling behind them struck her like a plasma blast. Defiance, hope, an inexplicable certainty that tomorrow could be different from today. The chamber's environmental systems began fluctuating. The carefully calibrated atmosphere, designed to suppress emotional responses and maintain judicial clarity, couldn't filter the vibrations emanating from this single human throat. Keth'ra watched as 3 enforcement officers rushed toward the prisoner's sphere, their neural disruptors raised. The first officer, a hulking Krandorian with scales the color of dried blood, pressed his weapon against the sphere's surface. Marcus Chen looked directly at him and smiled. Then he sang louder. The Krandorian's weapon arm began to shake. Not from fear, Keth'ra realized with growing horror, but from resonance. The human's voice had found some frequency that vibrated to the officer's exoskeletal structure, rattling his very bones. "This is exactly what you feared," Marcus said, pausing his song just long enough to speak. His voice carried easily through the chamber's perfect acoustics. "This is why you banned it. Not because our music is a weapon, but because it's an awakening." High Arbiter Threshkin slammed his judicial staff against the floor. The chamber's suppression field intensified, filling the air with a low subsonic hum designed to neutralize all unauthorized sound. Marcus Chen's song cut through it like light through darkness. "How?" The word escaped Keth'ra before she could stop it. Every species in the known galaxy had been rendered harmonically compliant by the Council's sound-dampening technology. The Velmari had surrendered their war chants. The Krandorians had abandoned their mating calls. The Thessic had willingly forgotten their ancestral hymns, all in service of galactic peace, all in exchange for order. But humans had only joined the Council 23 standard cycles ago. They were the newest species, the youngest civilization, supposedly the most primitive. Their music should have been the easiest to suppress. Instead, it had proven impossible to contain. "You want to know the funny thing?" Marcus asked, his voice cutting to the growing chaos as more officers rushed into the chamber. "We tried to warn you. When your first diplomats came to Earth, we played them Beethoven. Mozart. We showed them the blues, jazz, rock and roll. We thought we were sharing our culture." He laughed, a sound that sent involuntary shivers across Keth'ra's dorsal plates. "You looked at us like we'd handed you a biological weapon." High Arbiter Threshkin finally managed to activate the emergency containment protocol. A shimmering energy field dropped around Marcus's sphere, designed to absorb all sonic output. The chamber fell into oppressive silence. But Keth'ra could still feel the ghost of that melody humming through her nervous system. It was like a cognitive virus, burrowing into memory pathways she hadn't accessed in decades. She found herself remembering the ancient Velmari songs her grandmother had whispered to her as a child, songs that had been criminalized 3 generations before her birth, songs that made her people feel alive. "The charges against this human," Threshkin announced, his voice slightly unsteady, "are as follows. unauthorized sonic production, cultural contamination across 17 council worlds, and incitement of rebellion against the lawful governance of the Galactic Council. Marcus pressed his palm against the containment field. Where it touched the energy barrier, the light flickered and sparked. "You forgot the most important one," he said, his voice muffled but still audible. "I taught the Thessic their own songs. The ones you made them forget." The chamber erupted. Keth'ra watched as half the assembled diplomats surged at her feet, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of outrage and, could it be, curiosity. The Thessic delegation, 3 willowy beings with elongated skulls and gossamer wings, stood motionless in their observation alcove. Their compound eyes, usually dull with compliant serenity, now reflected something that looked dangerously like tears. "You remember, don't you?" Marcus called out to them. "The Dawn Chorus, the Song of Emergence. I found recordings in the human archives. Music historians preserved them when your own council deleted them. Your ancestors sent them to us as a gift, before the harmonization laws, before you were silenced." The eldest Thessic, Ambassador Velthoria, opened her mandibles. For a terrible, beautiful moment, Keth'ra thought she might actually sing. But the moment shattered as Threshkin activated the chamber's emergency lockdown. Blast doors sealed every exit. Security drones descended from hidden alcoves, their weapons trained on every movement. "This human will be executed at dawn," the High Arbiter declared. "And every world he has contaminated will be subjected to immediate sonic purification. The Council's peace will be preserved." Marcus Chen didn't struggle as additional restraints wrapped around his limbs. He didn't cry out as the containment sphere began descending into the floor, carrying him toward the holding cells far below the chamber. Instead, he looked directly at Keth'ra. Their eyes met for just an instant, his dark and warm, hers multifaceted and cold, and she saw something in his expression that made her breath catch in her thoracic cavity. He wasn't afraid. He was waiting. As the sphere disappeared into the floor, Keth'ra caught his final words, spoken so softly that perhaps only she could hear them through the chaos. "The song has already spread, Ambassador. Every being who heard even a single note carries it now, in their memories, in their souls." He smiled that strange human smile again. "You can kill me tomorrow, but you can't kill a melody." The floor sealed shut. The chamber slowly returned to order, but Keth'ra stood rooted in place, her mind racing with impossible thoughts. She could still feel it, that phantom rhythm pulsing somewhere beneath her conscious awareness, threatening to break through centuries of carefully conditioned silence. And somewhere deep in her chest, in the place where her grandmother's lullabies had once lived, something ancient stirred. The human was right. The song had already begun. Keth'ra couldn't sleep. She lay in her diplomatic quarters, wrapped in the temperature-regulated comfort of her rest pod. But every time she closed her secondary eyelids, the melody returned. It twisted through her dreams like smoke, fragments of the human song interweaving with whispered lullabies she hadn't heard in over 200 years. "Little one, the stars are singing," her grandmother's voice. Impossible. The harmonization protocols had purged those memories from Keth'ra's neural pathways when she was barely out of her chrysalis stage. The Council's cognitive engineers had assured her family that the procedure was complete, that no trace of the forbidden songs remained. They had been wrong. Keth'ra rose from her pod 3 hours before the scheduled execution. The station's artificial dawn cycle hadn't yet begun, leaving the corridors bathed in the blue-gray luminescence of night mode. Her footsteps echoed against the polished floors as she made her way toward the detention level, her diplomatic credentials clearing each security checkpoint without question. She told herself she was conducting an investigation. As a senior ambassador, she had every right to interrogate a prisoner whose crimes had implications for galactic stability. She told herself this was about duty, about understanding the threat that human music posed to the carefully maintained order of council space. She told herself many things. None of them explained why her hearts were racing. The detention level sprawled beneath the council chamber like a wound in the station's architecture, cold, utilitarian, stripped of the elegant crystalline structures that characterize the upper levels. Here, aesthetics surrender to function. Containment spheres lined the walls in perfect rows, each one housing a different category of offender against galactic law. Marcus Chen occupied the highest security cell at the corridor's end. The human sat cross-legged in the center of the sphere, eyes closed, perfectly still. The containment field surrounding him had been reinforced with sonic dampeners. 3 layers of them, Keth'ra noted, each designed to absorb different frequency ranges. Every possible precaution had been taken to prevent him from singing again. And yet, as she approached, she could have sworn she felt something humming through the floor. "I wonder when you come," Marcus said without opening his eyes. Keth'ra stopped 3 meters from the sphere. "How did you know it would be me? You were the only one who didn't look away." His eyes opened now, fixing her with that unsettling human gaze. Everyone else in that chamber, they were terrified or furious, or both. But you... He tilted his head, studying her. "You were listening. I was analyzing a threat." "No." A smile ghosted across his features. "You were remembering." The word struck her like a physical blow. Keth'ra's mandibles clicked together, an involuntary stress response she hadn't displayed since her youth. "That's impossible. The harmonization protocols don't work the way you think they do." Marcus rose smoothly to his feet, approaching the edge of his sphere. Up close, she could see the exhaustion etched into his face, the bruises from his arrest, the way his left hand trembled slightly, nerve damage, perhaps, from the neural restraints. They can suppress conscious memory, sure. They can make you forget the words, the melodies, the feeling of your grandmother's voice in your ear. Keth'ra's breath caught. She hadn't mentioned her grandmother. "But music isn't stored in conscious memory," Marcus continued. "It lives deeper than that, in the rhythm of your heartbeat, in the patterns of your neural firing, in the way your body instinctively knows how to move when certain frequencies hit your ears." He pressed his palm against the containment field, just as he had in the chamber. "The council didn't erase your music, Ambassador. They just buried it. And buried things have a way of rising. You speak as though you understand our neurology better than we do ourselves." "I don't understand your neurology at all," Marcus admitted. "But I understand music. I understand what it does to conscious beings, every conscious being, regardless of species." His voice softened. "On Earth we have a saying, where words fail, music speaks. It's not just poetry. It's biology. Music bypasses the rational mind entirely. It speaks directly to the parts of us that existed before language, before civilization, before thought." Keth'ra found herself stepping closer despite her training's screaming warnings. "Then you admit it. Human music is a weapon." "A weapon?" Marcus laughed, that same strange, unsettling sound from the chamber. "Ambassador, weapons destroy. Music does the opposite. It creates connection, emotion, memory." His expression grew serious. "That's why your council fears it. Not because it kills, but because it makes people feel alive. And beings who feel alive start asking dangerous questions." "What questions?" "Questions like, why are we forbidden from singing? What are we missing? What did we used to be before the harmonization laws made us compliant and quiet and safe?" He leaned closer to the barrier, his voice dropping to barely a whisper. "Questions like, why do I still remember my grandmother's lullabies, even though I was told they were erased forever?" Keth'ra's hands curled into fists. "You cannot possibly know about my grandmother." "I don't need to know about your grandmother," Marcus said gently, "because every species I've encountered has the same story. The Thessic had their dawn chorus, songs that celebrated the first light of their twin suns. The Crandorians had battle hymns that turned individual warriors into a single coordinated force. The Velmari." He paused, something like compassion flickering in his eyes. "The Velmari had lullabies, songs passed from mother to child, grandmother to grandchild, songs about the stars, songs that made little ones feel safe in an infinite, terrifying universe." She couldn't breathe. The air in her thoracic cavity seemed to have solidified. "The council didn't just suppress your music," Marcus continued. "They severed the thread that connected you to your ancestors. They made you forget that you were ever anything other than what you are now, obedient, isolated, alone." He pulled his hand back from a barrier. "But the thread isn't cut, Ambassador. It's just buried. And somewhere inside you, your grandmother is still singing. Keth'ra wanted to argue. She wanted to cite the psychological research, the sociological studies, the 3 centuries of peace that the harmonization laws had maintained across council space. She wanted to explain that some freedoms were too dangerous, that the chaos of unregulated emotional expression was a price too high for any civilization to pay. Instead, she heard herself ask, "How did you learn our songs?" Marcus smiled, not triumphantly, but sadly. Humanity kept records. When the Council's diplomats first came to Earth, they were horrified by our music, but they were also fascinated. They shared recordings from their home worlds, ancient songs, preserved in academic archives, labeled as cultural artifacts from the pre-harmonization era. They gave you our history. They gave us evidence, Marcus corrected, evidence that every species in this galaxy once sang, once danced, once felt things too big for words. His voice hardened. And then someone decided that feelings were too dangerous. Someone decided that peace was more important than joy. Someone built the harmonization laws and convinced an entire galaxy that silence was freedom. Footsteps echoed from the corridor behind her. Security patrol. Keth'ra had perhaps 60 seconds before she would need to explain her presence here. "Why are you telling me this?" she demanded. "You're scheduled for execution in hours. What do you possibly hope to accomplish?" Marcus met her gaze with an intensity that made her exoskeleton tighten. "Because you're going to help me, Ambassador." "That's absurd." "Is it?" He gestured at her with bound hands. "You came down here alone, in the middle of the night cycle, to speak with a condemned prisoner. You could have watched me die from the comfort of your diplomatic suite. Instead, you needed to understand." His voice dropped to barely audible levels. "You needed to know if what you felt in that chamber was real. And now you know it is." The footsteps grew closer. "In 3 hours, they'll execute me," Marcus said quickly. "But before they do, they'll broadcast the ceremony across every council world. Standard protocol for crimes of cultural contamination. They want to make an example." Understanding dawned cold in Keth'ra's chest. "You planned this." "I planned be heard." His smile returned, fierce and defiant. "And in 3 hours, when every being in council space is watching, I'm going to sing one more time. The question is whether you'll be ready to listen, really listen, to what happens next." The security patrol rounded the corner. Keth'ra turned away from the cell, her mind churning with impossible thoughts. Behind her, barely audible through the dampening fields, she heard Marcus begin to hum. The melody followed her all the way back to her quarters. The council archives existed in a section of the station that most diplomats never visited. Keth'ra navigated the narrow corridors with growing unease, her diplomatic credentials granting access to doors that hadn't been opened in decades. The air here tasted stale, recycled through filters that had long since lost their efficiency. Dust particles floated in the dim emergency lighting, disturbed by her passage through spaces meant to be forgotten. She shouldn't be here. The execution broadcast would begin in 90 minutes, and her presence was expected in the observation gallery with the other senior ambassadors. High Arbiter Threshkin had specifically requested her attendance, citing her proximity to the prisoner during the initial incident as reason for her continued involvement. Instead, she was searching for ghosts. The archive terminal hummed to life at her touch, its interface flickering with the hesitation of neglected systems. Keth'ra entered her access codes and began searching for records from the pre-harmonization era, the centuries before the Council had unified galactic civilization under its laws of sonic compliance. What she found made her exoskeleton go cold. The Velmari had not willingly surrendered their songs. Document after document revealed the truth that had been scrubbed from official histories. Her species had resisted the harmonization laws for nearly 50 years. They had staged protests, organized underground singing circles, hidden their children from the cognitive engineers who came to purge musical memory from developing minds. And when peaceful resistance failed, they had fought. Keth'ra stared at footage she had never known existed. Velmari warriors charging council enforcement positions, their battle songs rising in harmonies so complex that the audio alone made her vision blur. The recordings were fragmented, corrupted by age and deliberate degradation, but enough remained to shatter everything she had believed about her people's history. They had not been saved by the harmonization laws. They had been conquered by them. Finding what you needed? Keth'ra spun, her defensive spines extending involuntarily. Ambassador Velmari stood in the archive doorway, her gossamer wings folded against her elongated back, her compound eyes reflecting the terminal's glow. "How did you find me here?" "I follow the sound questions." The Thessic ambassador glided into the room, her movements eerily silent. "You carry them loudly, Ambassador Voss. Louder than you realize." Keth'ra's spine slowly retracted. "You shouldn't be in this section. These records are restricted. Many things are restricted." Velmari's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. Singing, dancing, remembering who we were before the silence swallowed us. She approached the terminal, studying the frozen image of Velmari warriors mid-charge. "Your ancestors fought beautifully. Mine did not resist long enough to leave such records." The Thessic submitted to harmonization voluntarily. Every history text confirms. History texts written by the Council. Velmari's voice carried an edge that Keth'ra had never heard from a usually placid species. History texts that erased our dawn chorus, our emergent songs, our funeral hymns that helped souls transition between worlds. Her wings rustled with suppressed emotion. "The human gave us back our funeral hymns, Ambassador. Do you understand what that means?" Keth'ra shook her head slowly. "It means we can mourn again." Velmari's compound eyes glistened with moisture. "For 3 centuries, my people have died in silence. No songs to guide them. No melodies to comfort those left behind. We process death as data, clinical, efficient, meaningless." Her voice cracked. "The human taught 12 of my people our ancestral death songs. 12 beings who can now grieve as our ancestors grieved, who can honor the dead as they deserve to be honored. That's why Threshkin is so determined to execute him publicly," Keth'ra realized. "He's afraid the songs have already spread too far. The songs have spread everywhere." Velmari moved closer, lowering her voice. "The human didn't just teach the Thessic. He's been traveling council space for 15 years, Ambassador. 15 years of sharing music, of teaching species their own forgotten songs, of planting seeds that the council cannot uproot. 15 years. Keth'ra's mind raced with the implications. Marcus Chen hadn't been captured. He had allowed himself to be caught. This execution, this public broadcast across every council world. "It's a concert," she whispered. "The largest audience in galactic history. And he's going to sing to all of them." Velmari's mandibles spread in what was unmistakably a smile. "Now you understand." But the containment fields, the sonic dampeners. The council will have every possible measure in place to prevent him from producing sound. "Yes." The Thessic ambassador reached into folds of her ceremonial robes and withdrew a small crystalline device, "which is why we need to ensure those measures fail." Keth'ra stepped back. "That's treason." "Is it?" Velmari held the device between her elongated fingers, letting the archive lights refract through its faceted surface. "Or is it liberation? The Council has committed crimes against every species in this galaxy, Ambassador. They have stolen our voices, our memories, our very identities. They have convinced us that slavery is peace and silence is freedom." Her eyes bore into Keth'ra's. "The human offers us a chance to reclaim what was taken. The only question is whether we're brave enough to accept it." Keth'ra's thoughts churned with conflict. Her entire career had been built on serving the Council, on maintaining the stability that the harmonization laws provided. She had believed, truly believed, that the suppression of music was a small price to pay for galactic peace. But she could still hear her grandmother's lullaby echoing in the depths of her memory. "Little one, the stars are singing." "What does the device do?" "It generates a counterfrequency," Velmari explained. "Designed by human engineers, refined by Thessic acousticians. When activated during the broadcast, it will neutralize the containment fields for approximately 3 minutes." She pressed the crystal into Keth'ra's palm, long enough for the human to sing. "Why give this to me? Why not use it yourself?" because the device must be placed in the broadcast control center, and only senior ambassadors have access during execution ceremonies. Velthoria's wings spread slightly, casting strange shadows across the archive walls. I am Thessic. Threshkin already suspects my loyalty, but you, Ambassador Voss, you are Velmari. You are above suspicion. You are exactly where you need to be. The crystal felt warm against Keth'ra's palm, humming with potential energy. Holding it was like holding a piece of music, made solid. Vibration captured in physical form. If I do this, she said slowly, there's no going back. The council will know. They'll execute me alongside the human. Perhaps. Velthoria turned toward the archive exit. Or perhaps, when the galaxy remembers how to sing, the council will no longer have the power to execute anyone. She paused at the doorway, looking back over her shoulder. The choice is yours, Ambassador. But choose quickly. The broadcast begins in 60 minutes. She glided away, leaving Keth'ra alone with the weight of impossible decision. The terminal still displayed the frozen image of Velmari warriors, her ancestors, fighting for the right to sing. They had failed. The council had been too powerful, their technology too advanced, their control too absolute. But they had tried. Keth'ra closed her fist around the crystal device. In her mind, her grandmother's voice grew stronger, the melody clearer than it had been in 200 years. She could almost see the old woman now. Her faded exoskeleton, her gentle eyes, the way her antennae would sway in time with the music she was forbidden to sing aloud. Little one, the stars are singing. Can you hear them calling you home? Keth'ra had spent her entire life serving an empire built on silence. Perhaps it was time to make some noise. She left the archives at a measured pace, the crystal hidden in the folds of her diplomatic sash. The execution chamber awaited, along with the broadcast that would reach every corner of council space. Trillions of beings would be watching, expecting to witness the death of a cultural criminal. Instead, they would witness a revolution. The countdown had begun. The execution chamber gleamed with terrible beauty. Crystalline walls amplified the light from 1,000 hovering observation drones, each one transmitting the ceremony to a different sector of council space. Diplomatic delegations filled the tiered seating, their expressions carefully neutral, their bodies still with enforced compliance. At the chamber's center, a raised platform awaited the condemned, a stage for death polished to mirror brightness. Keth'ra took her place in the senior ambassador section, the crystal device burning against her chest like a second heart. From here, she could see the broadcast control center, a transparent booth suspended above the chamber floor, staffed by council technicians monitoring every frequency, every vibration, every possible avenue of sonic escape. She had perhaps 10 minutes to reach it. Quite the spectacle, murmured Ambassador Drethkan of the Krandorian delegation, settling his massive bulk into the seat beside her. His scales rippled with anticipation. I've witnessed 17 executions in my tenure, but never one with such elaborate precautions. They've deployed enough sonic dampening to silence a supernova. The humans' crimes warranted extreme measures, Keth'ra replied, keeping her voice steady. Indeed. Drethkan's reptilian eyes narrowed. Though I wonder if the council protests too much. If human music were truly so dangerous, surely we would have seen evidence before now. Yet this one prisoner has the High Arbiter trembling like a hatchling. Before Keth'ra could respond, the chamber's great doors parted. Marcus Chen entered in chains. The gravitic shackles had been reinforced with neural suppressors, devices designed to disrupt the brain's ability to coordinate complex vocalizations. His mouth had been fitted with a sonic nullifier, a cruel mask that would absorb any sound before it could escape his lips. Additional restraints bound his chest, limiting his lung capacity to shallow, insufficient breaths. They had done everything possible to ensure his silence. And still, somehow, he walked like a man who had already won. The guards escorted him to the central platform, forcing him to his knees before the assembled dignitaries. High Arbiter Threshkin rose from his judicial throne, his ceremonial robes sweeping the floor as he approached a podium equipped with galaxy-wide broadcast capabilities. Citizens of the council, Threshkin began, his voice resonating through every speaker, every transmission node, every receiving device across civilized space. You witness today the consequences of cultural terrorism. This human, this Marcus Chen, has committed crimes against the very foundation of our peaceful civilization. Keth'ra rose quietly from her seat, moving toward the observation gallery's edge. The broadcast control center floated 15 meters above the chamber floor, accessible only by a narrow bridge, reserved for senior diplomatic personnel. He has spread forbidden frequencies across 17 worlds. Threshcan continued. He has corrupted compliant citizens with primitive sonic patterns. He has awakened memories that were rightfully purged for the safety and stability of all species. The bridge extended at Keth'ra's approach. Recognizing her credentials, she stepped onto it, her footsteps silent against the resonance-dampening surface. And now, before all the galaxy, he will face the ultimate sanction. Keth'ra reached the control center door. Through the transparent walls, she could see the technicians monitoring their equipment, their attention fixed on the ceremony below. None of them noticed her enter. Does the condemned wish to speak final words? On the platform, a technician removed Marcus's sonic nullifier. The human drew a deep breath, the first full breath he'd been allowed in hours, and looked directly into the primary broadcast drone. His eyes found Keth'ra through the control center's walls. He smiled. I have only one thing to say. Marcus spoke, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. And I'm going to sing it. Threshcan's expression twisted with rage. Activate maximum suppression. Now! Keth'ra pressed the crystal device against the broadcast control mainframe. The effect was instantaneous. Every sonic dampener in the chamber flickered, their frequencies scrambled by the counterpulse radiating from the crystal. The containment fields around Marcus wavered, became transparent, dissolved entirely. And in that moment of technological failure, Marcus Chen sang. The melody that emerged from his throat was unlike anything Keth'ra had heard in the council chamber, unlike anything she had imagined possible from a human voice. It started low, almost subsonic, a vibration that seemed to originate from the planet's core rather than from a single fragile being. Then it rose. The song built in layers, each phrase adding complexity to the one before. Keth'ra recognized fragments embedded within the melody, Velmari lullabies intertwined with Thessic dawn hymns, Krandorian battle chant harmonizing with human spirituals, dozens of species' lost songs woven together into something entirely new, something universal. The chamber's occupants began to react. Diplomats who had sat in compliant stillness for centuries suddenly swayed in their seats, their bodies responding to rhythms their conscious minds couldn't process. The Thessic delegation rose as one, their gossamer wings spreading wide, their mandibles opening in instinctive response to harmonies they hadn't heard in 300 years. And across the galaxy, trillions of beings stopped whatever they were doing to listen. Keth'ra watched the broadcast monitors in the control center, her heart's pounding. Every screen showed the same thing. Crowds gathering in public squares, individuals pausing mid-task, children looking up from their educational programs with expressions of wonder. The song was reaching them all, transmitted on every frequency the council used for official communications. What have you done? One of the technicians screamed at her, lunging for the mainframe. Keth'ra caught his arm. I've remembered who we are. Below, Marcus's song reached its crescendo. The words were in his native language, English. She thought it was called, but the meaning transcended translation. It was a song about loss and recovery, about darkness and dawn, about the irrepressible nature of hope in the face of systematic oppression. It was a song about waking up. The execution platform's gravity generators failed. Marcus rose slowly into the air, still singing, his voice somehow growing stronger even as the council systems crashed around him. The crystalline walls of the chamber began to resonate, adding their own frequencies to his melody, amplifying beyond anything technology should have allowed. And then the galaxy answered. Keth'ra heard it through the broadcast monitors, voices joining Marcus's song from every corner of council space. The Thessic sang their dawn chorus for the first time in 3 centuries. The Krandorians roared battle hymns that shook their homeworld's foundations. The Velmari, her own people, lifted their voices in lullabies that survived despite every attempt to erase them. Little one, the stars are singing, She was singing too, she realized. The words emerged from somewhere deeper than memory, somewhere the harmonization protocols had never been able to reach. Her grandmother's melody flowed through her, connecting her to ancestors she had never known, to a history that had been stolen but never truly lost. On the platform, surrounded by the chaos of failing systems and singing diplomats, Marcus Chen finally fell silent. The song continued without him now, a galaxy-wide chorus that no force in the universe could suppress. He looked up at Keth'ra through the control center's walls. "Thank you," he mouthed. Then his eyes closed and he collapsed against the platform, exhausted beyond measure. Guards rushed toward him, but they moved slowly now, their own neural pathways disrupted by melodies or species had forgotten centuries ago. Some of them had stopped entirely, standing motionless as tears streamed down their faces. High Arbiter Threshkin screamed orders that no one obeyed. The broadcast continued, carrying music to every corner of civilized space. And in the control center, surrounded by failing technology and rising song, Keth'ra finally understood what the human had meant about buried things rising. The Galactic Council had spent 300 years building an empire of silence. It had taken one human, one song, and 3 minutes of broadcast time to tear it down. The revolution wouldn't be complete today. Keth'ra knew that. There would be resistance, retaliation, desperate attempts to restore the old order. The Council's forces would try to regain control, to re-implement the harmonization protocols, to silence the galaxy once more. But they would fail, because music, once awakened, could not be silenced. It spread from voice to voice, generation to generation, species to species. It lived in the rhythm of heartbeats and the patterns of thought, and the deepest structures of conscious minds. The galaxy had remembered how to sing, and nothing would ever be the same. Below, medical teams reached Marcus Chen's unconscious form. Keth'ra watched them carry him away, toward imprisonment perhaps, or medical treatment, or some unknown fate that would unfold in the chaotic days ahead. But she wasn't worried about the human anymore. He had done what he came to do. Now it was up to the galaxy to decide what came next. Keth'ra left the control center and walked through corridors filled with singing diplomats, crying guards, and the beautiful chaos of species remembering who they had been before the silence. Her grandmother's lullaby played on an endless loop in her mind. "Little one, the stars are singing. Can you hear them calling you home?" For the first time in her life, Keth'ra could finally answer. Yes, she could hear them, and she was ready to sing back.